Hey guys, welcome back. If you're new here, my name is Becca and today I'm going to be talking about all of the series I've DNF'd, finished and I'm up to date on in 2020 so far. So this is going to be part one of my mid-year series check-in. I normally do it all in one video, but first off, this video is very late. It should have come to you in July. And secondly, if I did it all in one video, we would be talking about 37 series in total, which I don't mind doing once a year for my end of year wrap up. But for the mid-year, like, wow, that is a lot and more than I could process dealing with today. So in this video, we are going to be talking about 16 series. So far in 2020, I have 3 series that I've DNF'd. I have 6 series that I finished and I have 7 series that I'm currently up to date on, which means that I've read everything that has been published so far, but the series is incomplete. And then either next week or the week after, you have part 2 of this video to look forward to, which will be the 21 series that I have either started or made progress on in 2020 but still need to finish. So this video is going to be split down into sections, and the first section is going to be the series that I've DNF'd so far this year. The first one of those is The Raven and the Dove by Caitlin Davis. So this is a self-published arc that I received from NetGalley. So I read this in ebook, and it is a Tristan and Isolde retelling that takes place in these kingdoms in the sky. Every kingdom in the sky is represented by people that have been spliced with birds. So the leading kingdom are the doves, and then currently the bottom of the pile are the ravens. So this story is about the courtship trials that takes place every generation-ish, I believe. It's when the princes and princesses come of age, where there are a series of trials to see which princes will be a good match for which princesses, etc. So the Prince of the Ravens actually has a brother, and the Prince of the Ravens is disabled. So he asks his brother to step in for him in the courtship trials because it is imperative that their kingdom does well this time around, as they haven't for a very long time and their kingdom is failing. So this is about the princess of the Dove Kingdom falling for the Raven Prince when he isn't actually the Raven Prince, it's his bastard brother, and the complications that arise from that. Now, as this is self-published, it isn't on a traditional publishing schedule where you usually have 1 book per year. So this was released at the beginning of the year, and the sequel, The Hunter and the Mage, will be out at the end of the year, and I don't think I'm going to pick that up. I gave this one 2 stars. There were elements of it that I enjoyed. I liked the bastard Raven Prince and the, not necessarily grey morality, but the complications amongst the princes and their dynamic, and I liked the idea of it being a Tristan and Isolde retelling. However, this book was split across quite a few perspectives. You have the 2 main perspectives and then there's a couple of others as well, and it was 500 pages, which in my opinion was far too long, especially as one of the main issues that I had with this book is that it still felt pretty lacking to me and I wanted more from it. I didn't feel like anything was particularly well developed, either the relationship or the plot, because it was split across so many perspectives. And yeah, it's just, it was too long, but at the same time not enough work was put into any aspect of it for me. I was considering carrying on, but to be honest, I'm not that interested, so this is probably going to be a DNF. The second series I'm going to be DNFing is The Start of Me and You by Emery Lord. This is a young adult contemporary that follows a girl whose boyfriend has died, and it has been a year since his death and she wasn't even with him that long. However, she's felt like since he died her life is on hold. Anytime she has a moment of happiness, she feels guilty about it, and so now that a year has passed, she makes a plan on how she's going to claim her life back. And this plan includes things like joining an extracurricular activity and getting closer to her crush. So this was a book that I picked up, I think it was last month, and I didn't expect to enjoy it, and I did actually really like it. I gave this one 4 stars. However, I'm just not that interested in continuing it as a series. When I read contemporaries, they tend to be like a one and done kind of situation for me. I read them, I enjoy them while I'm reading them, and like I said, I enjoyed this one, so I think some elements of it will stick with me, but I have no desire or intrigue to read any more from these characters or this story. The third one that I'm going to be DNFing is one that I was unsure about, so there's still a possibility I may pick up the sequel to this. However, I anticipate that by the time it's released, I just won't be bothered to buy the sequel and then read it, and that is Blood Air by Emily Wenzel. So this is supposed to be a Anastasia retelling, or a loose Anastasia retelling, which I kind of went into it on the basis that it was an Anastasia retelling, and it follows, I don't even know, it follows a princess who has blood magic, and blood magic is very much looked down upon in here, and her father is murdered. She's blamed for the death, so she runs away from home. Then she breaks out a notorious criminal called Ramzan Quicktongue out of jail. Why? Because she believes that he can help her find the person who actually killed her father so she can return home and clear her name. So I just didn't like this. I didn't find it particularly absorbing, so I was struggling to concentrate, which was one of the main problems I had with it. In comparison to it being an Anastasia retelling, I just really didn't see it, aside from the fact that Ramzan's character arc very much mimics Dimitri's from the animated movie. I believe that this is supposed to be a retelling more of the real life story of Anastasia Romanov, but I didn't see it at all. I found the magic system to be a little bit lazy, because it started off kind of having loose boundaries for the magic, which kind of just went completely out the window, because whenever the author needed somebody with a very specific power in that moment, they would just appear, and it got a little bit ridiculous for me. So while I am slightly intrigued about continuing this book ended in exactly the same place that it started, and I feel like we made very little progress. So I don't think I'm going to actually be bothered to pick this up when the sequel's released. Moving on to the series that I've completed in 2020, the first one of these is Orange by Ichigo Takano. This is a manga series. It is a relatively short manga series as well. This is part one of the complete collection, so it has a number of volumes in it, but there are two big installments like this, which I read last year, and then there is a smaller companion novella, I guess, called Orange Future, which is what I actually read in 2020, that talks about a possible future scenario in this world. So if you guys are unfamiliar with Orange, it is a contemporary manga series that follows a girl who receives a letter through the post saying that if she does not change some of the things that she is about to do, then a boy who is just transferring into their class will not be around by the end of the year. So Naho goes out of her way to try and make sure that this doesn't happen. I just find this so cute. Like, contemporary manga is my favorite kind of manga, and I much prefer it to traditional contemporary novels. I just find it so cute and so wholesome, and things like this are my little heartwarming fluffy reads, I guess. So even though the series kind of goes downhill the further into it you get, I am still very glad that I read this series, and it is currently my favorite manga series of all time. I then finished up the Illuminate Files by Jay Kristoff and Amy Kaufman. I believe that I read the first two books in 2019 and finished the series up this year. So this is a young adult science fiction trilogy that is told completely in mixed media. We have like transcripts, instant messaging files, emails and stuff all in here. But the first book in this series follows Katie and Ezra, who have just broken up when the planet is attacked by this big evil corporation. Katie and Ezra manage to evacuate on a survivor fleet, however they do end up on different ships, and things among the fleet do very quickly start to go wrong. Illuminate and Gemini are tied for my favorite installments because I like the plot more in Illuminate but the characters more in Gemini. The third book was my least favorite of the series so far. I gave that one 4 stars, and that is just because it was wrapping the series up. It's kind of like Winter in the Lunar Chronicles, where it doesn't really focus on the specific characters in that book because it is kind of bringing everything together, so all of the characters are present. So I didn't enjoy it quite as much, but this is one of my favorite series now, and I'm so glad that I read it. This is one that I've kind of finished because it is the Six of Crows duology by Leigh Bardugo. So I have read Six of Crows and Crooked Kingdom. However, there is rumored to be a third installment in this series coming in the next few years. So at the moment, as this was written as a duology and I have read it as a duology, I'm counting it as completed, but I think there is going to be one more installment in the series in the future. So this is the second series set in Leigh Bardugo's Grishaverse, and it follows this group of rogues and criminals who have been brought together by Becca to perform a heist to break the inventor of a very dangerous drug out of a very high security, impenetrable prison. So I did really enjoy this series. I prefer Crooked Kingdom to Six of Crows. My favorite thing about this series is the atmosphere. I think Leigh Bardugo does a really great job of creating this grimy underworld in the city of Ketterdam. I also really like a lot of the characters in this series. My favorite characters are Kaz and Inej. I also really love Jesper and Wylan as well. Surprisingly, my least favorites of the main cast are Nina and Matthias, and I know not a lot of people love Matthias, but everybody everybody pretty much loves Nina, and she's not my fave. I like her, but I don't love her, you know? But yeah, I am definitely very glad that I finished this. I've been buddy reading the entire Grishaverse with Jade from JD Ray Reads, and we read Six of Crows late last year, and it took us a while to get to Crooked Kingdom, but I did really enjoy the conclusion of the duology. Crooked Kingdom nearly made me cry, and while I don't necessarily like this more than the Grisha trilogy because that has a special place in my heart, I do understand why everybody loves this, and I think it definitely has its merits. I also finished the Winter Night trilogy by Catherine Arden, the first book being The Bear and the Nightingale. This is one of the series I read this year that I both started and completed in 2020. So this is an adult fantasy. It's very slow moving, very atmospheric, and it is heavily inspired by Russian folklore. So we follow a girl in here called Vasilisa who is sighted, which means that she can see the spirits of the forest, and through the beginning of this book we follow her growing up in a northern Russian town. However, when she gets a little bit older, things start to change as her father remarries, and he marries a very devout Christian woman who is also sighted but believes the spirits to be demons. This woman also brings a priest with her to the town who starts to convert the people of the town away from the old gods to Christianity, which means that the spirits of the forest and the household are no longer receiving tribute, which leaves the town open to attack from malevolent spirits. So I have just very recently read the last book in this series, and I love a lot of things about this series. The second book was my favorite one overall, but I think that the atmosphere is very strong throughout. We have multiple focuses in this series. The first book focuses on the magical elements. The second book focuses on the historical political elements, because this series takes place at the time that Russia went to war with the Mongolian Empire, and then the third book kind of ties it all together. I really love Catherine Arden's writing throughout this. I would say that the series is weakest on the plot. Sometimes some of the occurrences in the plot do seem a little bit unnecessary, but overall, if you like very slow moving, character driven stories that are very atmospheric and steeped in folklore, this is definitely a series for you. I also read a couple of series that I do not own physically. The first one of those is the Maybe series by Colleen Hoover. So this is a new adult romance series that follows the characters of Sydney and Ridge. Sydney lives with her roommate, and the story starts off where she breaks up with her boyfriend because she finds out that he has been cheating on her. Now, over the last few weeks, she has been going out onto her balcony and listening to a boy across the complex playing his guitar, and she has just been singing along. Even though he isn't singing, she's been making lyrics, and he notices this and asks her to contact him so that she can write the lyrics for the songs that he's playing on his guitar, which she does. So when we come to the point where she breaks up with her boyfriend, she ends up moving in with the boy across the way, who is Ridge, and they build a friendship and start writing music together. So this is a series that I didn't necessarily love. I believe, I'm struggling to remember now, but I think there are 2 main installments and 1 novella. I did enjoy the series overall, but I really like Colleen Hoover. I think that she deals with sometimes hard-hitting topics in the case of It Ends With Us, and sometimes she just writes really angsty, over-dramatic, slightly problematic new adult romances, and when I'm going into a romance, that is the kind of thing I like. I like them to be really over dramatic and overly emotional in really unnecessary ways. The Maybe series, while it still dealt with a couple of hard-hitting topics, like there's deaf representation in here and also somebody living with a long-term terminal illness, the romance by itself was a lot more wholesome and a lot more cutesy and a lot less angsty than I personally prefer. So while I did enjoy the process of reading this series, it isn't one of my favorites by Colleen Hoover, and it probably will not stick with me. And the other series that I've kind of finished but not really is the Charlie Travesty series by KJ Sutton and Jesse Elliott. So this is a self-published novel that was serialized, so it was released in 4 parts that are around 100 pages each, and it follows the story of a vampire princess called Charlie Travesty who is about to go through something called her awakening. Now, the awakening happens sometime around a vampire's 23rd birthday, and when they wake up they find out that their eyes have changed colour, and the colour of their eyes denotes what sector of the city they are going to be living in for the rest of their lives. So Charlie wakes up on the morning of her awakening and discovers that her eyes are a colour that nobody expected them to be, and this kicks off a chain of events. So the reason why I say I kind of completed this is that I have completed the 4 serialized parts that make up the first novel. However, I believe that it is coming back in 2021 and we'll have another novel's worth of serialized parts. So Charlie Travesty came in at around around, I want to say 3.5 stars for me overall. I enjoyed quite a few elements of this. I really like all of the characters. There is one love interest that I really love and much prefer over the other one, and I also liked some of the, not necessarily plot twists, but the reveals, because it does kind of step into that like really dramatic kind of story that I love, especially with all this angst with multiple love interests. But I think because I read it in its individual sections and there was quite a gap in between me reading some of them, I don't have a really good grip on the plot, so I would have to read it all as one to kind of get a overview of the plot in its entirety and figure out like how well constructed that aspect is. But overall, I really did enjoy this, and I'm excited for the second part to be released next year. So moving on to this series that I'm currently up to date on. So these are series where the next installment is not going to be published in 2020 as far as I'm aware, and I have read everything that has been published in this series up to date. So we'll start with the only one of these that I don't have with me because I have lent them out to Ashley from A Frolic Through Fiction, and that is the Heartstopper webcomic by Alice Oseman. So this is a really cute young adult male contemporary series. It is all available for free online on Tapas. However, I have the binder, and it follows Nick and Charlie. One of them is openly gay, the other one is coming to terms with his sexuality, but it is just about them and their relationship and how cute and wholesome they are. So I'm not currently up to date with everything that has been published on Tapas because I do tend to read them in line with the bind-ups. Even if I do read them on Tapas, I wait until one of the volumes has come to its completion, and then I kind of just read it all at once instead of reading it all in bits, because I'm far too impatient to read like 2 pages every couple of weeks. As far as I'm aware, volume 4 is not going to be released in 2020. This is the only one out of this stack that I am unsure about, because graphic novels and comics tend to have a more unpredictable release schedule, I want to say. But I am very much enjoying this. It's a very quick read, it's very light, it does deal with some heavy topics, and it does have trigger warnings that are disclosed in the book. The only ones I can really remember right now are disordered eating and self-harm, but overall it does focus on their romantic relationship, and it's just a really cute series. We then have Crescent City by Sarah J. Maas. This was released at the beginning of this year. I believe that the second installment may possibly be out at the end of 2021, but this is currently my favorite book of all time. It follows a girl called Bryce Quinlan, who is a little bit of a party girl, and her best friend Danica is the head of a pack of wolf shifters who are also the security for Crescent City. So this story starts off with a criminal that Danica has put behind bars being unexpectedly released, and then it does skip 2 years forward into present day, where the main character Bryce Quinlan has been recruited by the Archangel of Crescent City to investigate a string of murders that they thought that they had solved but they hadn't, and they think that Bryce will be the best person to lead this investigation, and because it is quite dangerous they assign her a personal bodyguard in the form of fallen angel Hunt Athalar. So this is an urban fantasy romance, very good, big on the sexual tension, and it also has a very complex, very intricate fantasy plotline like Sarah J. Maas is known for, and yeah, I loved it. You guys know I love this. I did a full week of content on this book. You know I'm trash, we don't need to dwell. The one that I'm actually not sure if I'm gonna DNF now that I'm looking at it is All the Stars and Teeth by Adeline Grace. This was an Owlcrate book that I received, and I believe I read it because it came up on my Bookopoly TBR probably as a most recent purchase. But this is a young adult fantasy that follows a girl who is an animancer, which means that she has mastery over people's souls. So this book starts off where she's about to perform a ceremony that will prove her to be the next ruler of this group of islands, and her magic just spins out of control and she ends up on the run with a guy who is a pirate, and they head off across most of these islands trying to bring an end to a destructive new magic, which will mean that the main character can go and reclaim her throne. So this has a whole ton of Moana vibes. I watched Moana for the first time around the same time that I read this, and I think setting wise it's very Moana-like, and also the plot of a princess heading out on a boat with a companion to try and find the answer that is going to save all of her kingdom. As far as the plot and the characters and everything goes, this was kind of enjoyable to read, but nothing too complex that didn't blow me away in any way. I enjoyed the setting, I enjoyed a couple of elements in the plot twist. There was one plot twist that I particularly enjoyed, but then I didn't really like how the story wrapped up either. I'm kind of intrigued to see where the sequel goes, but I do think that this is going to end up like Blooder, that by the time the sequel is released I'm not going to care care enough to buy it and pick it up. We then have the Aurora Cycle by J. Kristoff and Amy Kaufman. This is the second young adult sci-fi series that they have co-written. The first one, of course, being the Illuminate files. I did read both installments in this series this year. I did receive an arc of Aurora Burning, which is the second book, and the third book I believe is going to be released in 2021. So this follows a crew called Squad 312, but we start off with Tyler Jones, who is a teenage prodigy, and he is set to finish at the top of his class at the Aurora Academy when he is late to his ceremony because he is rescuing a girl from, I think it's a 200-year-old wreckage of a spaceship that left Earth 200 years ago and never arrived at its destination. So because Tyler's late, instead of being able to pick from everybody in his class and have the best of the best, he has to scrape the bottom of the barrel to put together this crew called Squad 312, who are each very good at their respective fields. However, they have either behavioral issues or social issues, which means that they are not desirable teammates. I really enjoy this series. The second book I did enjoy more than the first one. It is very much like the Illuminate files in the banter between the characters and also the characters that make up the squad. It also has a fun sci-fi plot. It's a little bit tongue-in-cheek at times. It's a little bit over dramatic. It's a little bit unrealistic in some ways, and it's also a little bit convenient, but it is a really fun, campy space opera that I really enjoyed reading. Based on where the second book ended, I'm very excited to read the third book in the series because I'm not sure what they're going to do about that. I do have my theories, but it ended in just a not very great place, and I want to see how the characters manage to dig their way out of that hole. Next up, we have The Course of Miracles by Kester Grant. I received this as an e-arc on NetGalley, and then I did get a copy in, I think it was the May or June maybe, Illumicrate. So this is a Les Mis retelling. I wasn't sure what to expect from it because it has a very big marketing push behind it, and there were a whole ton of arcs flying around, which in the UK is a little bit unusual, but I gave it a go and I actually really enjoyed it. So this is a Les Mis retelling that focuses on Eponine and Cassette. We start off with Eponine, whose sister is about to be sold into the Guild of Flesh, which is the prostitution guild, but just before this happens, her sister sends Eponine away and tells her to join the Thieves Guild for protection. So Eponine goes and does that, and while she's there, she trains and she plans, and her idea is that she is eventually going to trade something with the Master of the Guild of Flesh to get her sister back. Now, that is the very beginning of the book, and then we skip forward a few years where Eponine is getting closer to Cassette with the idea of actually trading Cassette for her sister. I did really enjoy this story. I had a couple of problems with it. I think that it skipped over some character development by having 2 time jumps in here that skip a number of years, and I also think that there were not necessarily too many action scenes in here, but the main character completed a series of impossible feats, and it kind of was like, let's go do this impossible task, and it takes 3 chapters, and then it was like on to the next thing. My favorite thing about this book that I'm definitely looking forward to seeing in the sequel is more of the Court of Miracles, because I really liked that atmosphere. I do really like books that have a criminal underworld, and I want to see a few more of the guilds. In this one, you get to know quite a bit about the Guild of Thieves, the Guild of Assassins, the Guild of Beggars, and the Guild of Flesh, but there are 5 more guilds in here that are only touched upon, and I'm hoping that they play a more prominent role in the sequel. I then read the latest book in the Grishaverse, which is King of Scars by Leigh Bardugo. This is the first book in the Nikolai duology, and the next book I believe is going to be the next Grishaverse book published after the Guide of Saints that's come in later this year. So I can't say too much about the plot of this one because of spoilers, but it does follow 2 characters from the original Grisha trilogy, which are Nikolai and Zoya, and 1 character from Six of Crows, which is Nina. Now, all of the characters in this book are very heavily dealing with repercussions from their respective series. So Nikolai and Zoya both have their personal issues to sort out, but they are also very much focused on rebuilding Ravka after it was decimated by war in the Grisha trilogy. We also have Nina in a separate part of the world who is also dealing with a lot of personal issues, but is also pursuing a direct continuation of the storyline from Six of Crows to do with that dangerous Grisha drug that I mentioned earlier. So this is actually my lowest rated book in the Grishaverse so so far. I do think that it tried to do a little bit too much, because even though I'm assuming that the plot lines and perspectives are going to come together at the end, at the moment we have 3 different characters pursuing 2 different plot lines, and in this book they don't really intersect or meet. So currently my thoughts are that it would be more beneficial if Leigh Bardugo had written a Nikolai spin-off story and a Nina spin-off story instead of bringing them both together. However, like I said, I am assuming that having 2 perspectives, or there are 3 perspectives, but having them all in one book is going to become relevant in the sequel. But at the minute it's a little bit too much and it's a little bit too disjointed for my taste. And then the final series we are going to be talking about in this video is the Dark Shores series by Elliot Brooks. Elliot Brooks is a booktuber, and I bought this book because I wanted to support her. So this is a very complex adult epic fantasy story that has a lot of elements in it. Actually, we have multiple different kingdoms in here, and now that I'm trying to remember the exact plot of this, I am struggling a little bit. But essentially we follow a series of struggling kingdoms and the royalty and lords of these struggling kingdoms as they are all trying to better their own countries, and also the friction between them. In some of the kingdoms there's been an ongoing war between 2 different ruling families that stem from the same lineage, where one faction believes that one person should have been the king and the other faction believes that their brother should have been the king. And there are also romances that can't be romances because allegiances need to be built. There is magic in here, there's animal magic. One of the characters can speak to dragons. We also have fiends that are plaguing the land. It's very reminiscent of Final Fantasy X in quite a few ways, and also has a lot of influence from Brandon Sanderson in here as well. So this one I am going to reread before the sequel is released. I don't know when that is because it is a self-published book, so it could literally be any time. It is adult epic fantasy as well, and they take a long time to write, so I'm not holding out much hope for the sequel arriving anytime soon. But when it does, I am going to reread this because I read it quite a few months ago now and I have forgotten quite a lot about it to start off with. But I often find when I go into adult fantasy, especially the first book in a series, you have very little context and you're learning things as you go along, so you find that if you reread it you understand a lot more on your reread. So I'm kind of not necessarily putting it down to the book that I've forgotten a lot about this, but just the fact that it was quite confusing to start off with and I didn't have a full grip of the world. So this is probably one that I'm not going to talk about very much until the sequel is released, and then I will give it a reread and continue, because I did actually really enjoy this. It has a few flaws, the writing is not 100%, but I did think that it was very enjoyable and I'm very interested in the sequel. So that is it, finally. Those are the 16 series that I have either DNF, finished, or I'm up to date on in 2020 so far. I am so glad that I'm going to split this video into 2 because I am already tired and we still have 21 more series to talk about in the follow-up to this video. So down in the comments, please let me know if you have read any of the series I've talked about today and what you thought of them if you have. Aside from that, please don't forget to like this video if you liked it and subscribe if you wanna. If you head into my description box, you'll find a link to my Goodreads, Instagram, and Twitter if you'd like to follow me on any of those, as well as a link to my Bookish body butter and candle website, the Instagram for that, and a 10% off discount code. But that's it from me today, guys. Bye!
Oh, you bite your friend like chocolate. You say you'll go where nobody knows, with guns hidden under our petticoats. We're never gonna quit it, no, we're never gonna quit it, no.